Hello and welcome. I am Professor Rashmi Raman and this is Module 18 of International Criminal Justice. This module deals with terrorism. What are the learning outcomes in this module? For you to understand the meaning of terrorism and the specialized conventions established to counter terrorism. Secondly, for you to understand the important role of the United Nations in countering terrorism. Let us now begin with a brief introduction to terrorism under international criminal law. Terrorism as a concept has been the central focus of media and global politics for the better part of the last 2 decades. Names of terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda, Daesh, known as ISIS, etc., and infamous terror attacks such as the 9/11 attack in the United States, the 1993 Mumbai bomb blasts, the Madrid train bombings, etc., have become ingrained into the daily public discourse of society. People across the world are all too familiar with the threat that is posed by terrorist cells, and the possibility of being subject to a terror attack remains quite real. Of course, we are speaking in the aftermath of the Barcelona attacks of August 2017. Terrorism has become a prominent issue in the international community since the turn of the 19th century, when acts of terror grew in frequency. There are a variety of avenues from which terrorism can be viewed, but for the purposes of this module, the primary focus shall be on terrorism as a criminal act committed by entities under international law. The discussion on the political and sociological ideologies pertaining to terrorism can only be used here as a tool of understanding to better our context and situate terrorism in international criminal law. Further, this module does not delve into the domestic intricacies of terrorism, such as the domestic definitions of the term and how domestic legal systems have dealt with alleged non-state actors, including terrorists. The Charter of the United Nations, in its preamble, sets out the objective to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained. International criminal law seeks to meet this objective. 2 main instrumentalities ensure the maintenance of international criminal law, namely the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. You must note, however, that these are 2 completely separate organs. The International Court of Justice, which you have referred to many times in the past, the ICJ, was established as the principal judicial organ of the United Nations under the 1945 Charter of the United Nations. It began its work in April 1946. The court's role is to settle, in accordance with international law, legal disputes submitted to it by states, and to give advisory opinions on legal questions referred to it by authorized United Nations organs and specialized agencies. The International Criminal Court, that is the ICC, in contrast, was established as a result of the adoption of the historic Rome Statute, which we have discussed previously. In July 1998, the ICC is the first permanent treaty-based international criminal court and seeks to punish those who perpetrate crimes against the international community. Due to the lack of a precise definition on terrorism, the Rome Statute, along with several United Nations conventions, has criminalized certain terrorist acts that pose a threat to the international community as a whole. Thus, the International Criminal Court has given itself the jurisdiction to try any case that involves any acts of international terrorism. Let us now turn to how the Rome Statute defines terrorism. Having various political and social underpinnings, the word terrorism still does not have a single universally accepted definitions. Many signatory states to the Rome Statute have historically been rather reluctant to assign a precise scope to identify any act as one amounting to terrorism. However, it would be impossible to convict anyone for terrorist activities unless some framework for the very meaning of the word is established. To solve this issue and to harmonize the many definitions, the international community began adopting various sector-based conventions criminalizing specific actions as terrorist activities. Various judicial and legislative attempts have been made since the adoption of the Rome Statute at various conferences to define terrorism. One such understanding is reflected in the 1994 United Nations General Assembly resolution on measures to eliminate international terrorism. This resolution condemned terrorist activities as activities under the following heads. 1. Criminal acts intended or calculated to provoke a state of terror in the general public, a group of persons or particular persons for political purposes are in any circumstance unjustifiable, whatever the considerations of a political, philosophical, ideological, racial, ethnic, religious or any other nature that may be invoked to justify them. Secondly, the judicial take on our understanding of the term terrorism may be attributed to the jurisprudence of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, which we discussed earlier modules. The STL was established by the Security Council in 2007 in order to prosecute those most responsible for the 2005 assassination of Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, amongst others. In a landmark ruling delivered on February 16, 2012, the scope of the word terrorism was discussed in significant detail by the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. While the law of Lebanon, that is the municipal law of Lebanon, played a crucial role in this case, the tribunal chose to interpret the local law in the context of customary international law. The tribunal recognized that it is widely accepted that no precise definition of terrorism exists in international law. In order to harmonize the existing definitions, the tribunal decided to point to a certain number of crucial elements in order for a crime to amount to terrorism. 1. That the perpetration of a criminal act such as murder, kidnapping, taking of a hostage, arson and so on, or threatening such an act. 2. The intent to spread fear among the population, which would generally entail the creation of public danger or directly or indirectly coercing a national or international authority to take some action or refrain from taking such an action when this act involves a transnational element. Having isolated the principles, codification of the definition was also attempted, first in 1937 under the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of Terrorism. Although this treaty required only 3 ratifications to come into force, which as you know is in the realm of treaty making, it received only 1 and was subsequently abandoned. Article 1 Clause 2 of this treaty, which never came to force, defined terrorist acts as acts of terrorism, criminal acts directed against a state and intended or calculated to create a state of terror in the minds of a particular person or group of people or the general public. The lack of a single definition has resulted in a thematic consideration and a piecemeal codification of criminal acts deemed to be terrorist acts by the international community. A direct consequence of this is the lack of global uniformity in the understanding of terrorism and what are the core minimum criteria to be accepted for an act to become terrorist act. Even though states have adopted their own local definitions of the term, the only way to combat terrorism is if all the states work together to find and extradite non-state actors who identify as terrorists. Now let us look at what is the role of the international community represented by the United Nations in countering terrorism. As you know, international terrorism has had its impact on the entire international community and has always been cause of supreme importance to the United Nations. As early as 1996, the General Assembly had adopted a resolution 51 of 210 of 17th December to adopt measures to collectively combat terrorism. Under this resolution, the UN decided to establish an ad hoc committee in order to elaborate and create an international treaty for the suppression of terrorist bombings and subsequently an international treaty for the suppression of acts of nuclear terrorism. In order to supplement relating existing international instruments and thereafter to address the means of further developing a comprehensive legal framework of conventions that deal with international terrorism, in the hope that harmonized definition could be distilled. This ad hoc committee's mandate was further clarified by two subsequent declarations which were adopted by the General Assembly. One, the Declaration on Measures to Eliminate International Terrorism, and the second was the Declaration to supplement the 1994 Declaration on Measures to Eliminate International Terrorism. Now, the hope behind all of this was to get to the heart of what is terrorism. The Secretary General also established the Counter-Terrorism Implementation Task Force, known as the CTITF, in 2005. This was endorsed by the General Assembly through the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy, which was adopted by consensus in 2006. The CTITF has been established in order to enhance coordination and create a kind of coherence of counter-terrorism efforts of the United Nations. The task force consists of 34 international entities which have stakes in multilateral counter-terrorism efforts as a result of their work. The aim of the CTITF is to increase the benefits derived from each entity by delivering them as one to help member states to implement what became known as the 4 pillars of its strategy. What are these pillars? These are measures to address the conditions conducive to the spread of terrorism, measures to prevent and combat terrorism, measures to build states' capacities to prevent and combat terrorism, and to strengthen the role of the United Nations system in that regard, including measures to ensure respect for human rights for all and the rule of law as the fundamental basis for the fight against it. One of the greatest demonstrations of both the challenge of terrorism to the international order and the powers of the international community to take adequate measures to prevent such attacks were of course the attacks of 11 September 2001 in the territory of the United States of America, known famously as the 9/11 attacks. After the 9/11 attacks, organizations of the United Nations system mobilized their resources immediately in their respective spheres to step up the action against terrorism. On the 28th of September that year, the Security Council adopted the famous Resolution 1373 under the enforcement provisions of Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations to prevent the financing of terrorism. This made the collection of funds for any terrorist related actions a criminal offense and immediately froze terrorist financial assets, supposedly. A counter-terrorism committee was established to ensure the proper implementation of Resolution 1373. In order to combat terrorism, all member states were to pool their intelligence on this issue and submit it to the committee. Furthermore, the resolution empowered all states to adjust their national laws so that they may ratify the existing international conventions on terrorism. multiple relevant resolutions dealing with more or less the same issues around financing and implementation were adopted after this, but Resolution 1373 still remains the foundation to understand these. Now let us look at some of the specialized conventions in the United Nations. The strategy was adopted by General Assembly on 6th September 2006, 5 years after the 9/11 attack. Member states recognized by now the importance of existing international counter-terrorism instruments and pledged themselves to becoming parties to these. As we speak, there are over 14 conventions adopted by the United Nations with counter-terrorism at the heart. Some of these are the Convention on Offences and certain other acts committed on board aircraft, the 1963 Aircraft Convention. This convention authorizes an aircraft commander to impose reasonable measures, including restraint, on any person she has reason to believe is a threat to the safety of the aircraft. This convention is applicable only to acts affecting in-flight safety and requires contracting states to take custody of offenders and return control of the aircraft to the lawful commander. Another such convention is the Convention for the Suppression of Unlawful Seizure of Aircraft, the 1970 Unlawful Seizure Convention. This treaty makes it a punishable offense for any person on board an aircraft in flight to unlawfully, by force or by threat of force, or by any other form of intimidation, or to attempt to seize or exercise control over the aircraft. Parties to this treaty are under a mandate to impose penalties in case of hijackings and to cooperate with each other with regard to all criminal proceedings brought under this convention. Those that have custody of offenders are either to extradite the offender or submit the case for prosecution, following the maxim aut dedere aut judicare, to extradite or prosecute, a principle of customary international law. Thirdly, the protocol supplementary to the Convention for the Suppression of Unlawful Seizure of Aircrafts in 2010 supplements and expands the scope of the Convention for the Suppression of Unlawful Seizure of Aircraft 1970. Under this treaty, different forms of aircraft hijackings, including those undertaken by modern technological means, are now covered under this treaty. The provisions of the Beijing Convention relating to threat or conspiracy to commit an offense have also been included under this treaty. Fifthly, we have the Convention for the Suppression of Unlawful Acts against the Safety of Civil Aviation. This treaty is a 1971 instrument that makes it an offense for any person to intentionally perform an act of violence against a person on board an aircraft in flight. No actions capable of endangering the safety of an aircraft, for instance, bringing explosives in an aircraft, or to be an accomplice to any such person who brings explosives, are made offenses under the convention. Severe penalties have been imposed on such offenders. And of course, it is up to the states to implement these penalties. Then we have the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crimes Against Internationally Protected Persons of 1973. Now this is the so-called Diplomatic Agents Convention. An internationally protected person under this treaty is any head of state, Minister of Foreign Affairs, representative or official of the state or international organization who is entitled to treaty law given special protection in a foreign state for themselves and for their family. This treaty deals with the protection of such persons from an attack on their liberty and punishes the offenders by taking into account the grave nature of the offense committed. Not only is it an affront to the dignity of the state It is also an affront to the dignity of the diplomat. An international convention for the suppression of terrorist bombings is yet another convention. This goes by the Terrorist Bombing Convention. This relaxes the jurisdictional requirements in cases of grave terrorist activities, which means that it uses the tool that we have studied before, the tool of universal jurisdiction, in cases of use of lethal devices with the intent to kill or cause excessive destruction of public property in defined public spaces. Another convention that I would like to discuss is the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism, Terrorist Financing Convention of 1999. The aim of this convention is to prevent the direct and indirect financing of terrorists under the garb of charitable, social or cultural organizations. Member states to this convention are under an obligation to make those who finance terrorism criminally, civilly and administratively liable. This provides measures for the identification, due diligence, freezing and seizure of such funds and makes bank secrecy illegal in case of such organizations. Then we have the International Convention for the Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism. This was adopted in 2005, and under it, states are encouraged to cooperate with each other with regard to criminal investigation and enforce extraditions under this convention. Covering a broad range of acts and targets, the Nuclear Convention includes and specifically applies to states that are nuclear powers, including states that have nuclear power plants and nuclear reactors. Both crisis situations, that is, assisting states to solve the situation, and post-crisis situations, that is, making the nuclear materials safe through the intervention of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, have been provided for in this convention. Besides these conventions that we have discussed, there are various other conventions, such as the International Convention Against the Taking of Hostages of 1979, the so-called Hostage Convention, the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials of 1980, which predates the 2005 Nuclear Convention and is known as the Nuclear Materials Convention, the Convention on the Marking of Plastic Explosives for the Purpose of Detection 1991, that is the Plastics Explosives Convention, etc., also deal with this issue of terrorism. How does one protect human rights while countering terrorism? The issue of human rights and terrorism have long been a concern of the United Nations. Following the attacks by terrorists on the 11th of September 2001 and the subsequent global surge in acts of terrorism worldwide, it has become even more important to address that while condemning terrorism unequivocally and while recognizing the duty of states to protect those who live within their jurisdiction from terrorism, the UN must also place a priority on the question of protecting human rights in the context of counter-terrorism measures. Because at no point must it become like martial law. The defense of human rights and upholding the rule of law while dealing with counterterrorism is indeed at the heart of the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy. Member states, parties to this strategy, have acknowledged that effective counterterrorism measures and the protection of human rights are not in fact conflicting goals, but are complementary and mutually reinforcing aims. States have pledged to take measures aimed at addressing violations of human rights and to ensure that any measures taken to combat terrorism by using counterterrorism strategy fully comply with the other human rights obligations that states are obliged to undertake under different treaty regimes. Moreover, the Special Rapporteur operating under the new Human Rights Council also works to identify, exchange and promote best practices on measures to counter terrorism that respect human rights and fundamental freedoms. The Special Rapporteur has also addressed in a report allegations of human rights violations in the course of countering terrorism. The work of the Special Rapporteur is to visit select individual countries and to engage in correspondence with more states about their laws and practices. The Rapporteur reports regularly to both the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly, including on selected thematic issues, and especially the results of the country visits. The idea behind this is to draw some kind of balance between what human rights requires and what counterterrorism requires. Starting in the late 1960s, the global West was disinclined to accept claims made by developing and Arab states to the effect that Israel was perhaps a terrorist state, believing that only individuals or groups could be characterized as terrorists. However, since the 1980s, and with some incontrovertible evidence that some states were behind terrorist activities, this stance was altered, describing such acts as state-sponsored terrorism. Now, this is in complete contrast to the general understanding that terrorists are non-state actors. The Security Council itself has condemned the involvement of states in certain incidents relating to terrorism. But even where, as in the Lockerbie incident, for example, even where the Security Council acted under Chapter 7 of the Charter, it has never used the term state-sponsored for terrorism, preferring instead to demand that culprit states desist from all forms of terrorist action and desist from offering any assistance to terrorist groups. The inclusion of terrorism within the practice of Chapter 7 necessarily creates some form of terrorist activity as a threat to the peace, breach of the peace, or an act of aggression, making these theoretically susceptible to a collective action response from states. In its own fight against state-sponsored terrorism, the United States Congress amended the 1976 Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, the FSIA, through the adoption of a resolution called AEDPA, which permits civil suits for compensatory and punitive damages against a foreign state or its state agency or any instrumentality that either commits the terrorist act or provides aid to the culprit group. A terrorist act in this instance includes torture, extrajudicial killing, aircraft sabotage, taking of hostages, etc., provided that the victim is a national of the United States and that the offense takes place outside the territory of the United States. Let us now turn to terrorism as an organized crime. With relevance to the recent years, theories have been raised with regard to possible links between terrorism and organized crime. For example, narco-terrorism, that is the illicit trafficking in drugs, the unlawful arms trade, money laundering, and smuggling of nuclear and other lethal materials feature prominently among activities linked to terrorism in the annex attached to the General Assembly Resolution of 1373. The Resolution 49 or 60 of 1994 also has an important reference. In that year, the World Ministerial Conference on Organized Transnational Crime adopted the Naples Political Declaration and Global Action Plan against organized transnational crime, which inter alia recognizes the existence of clear links between transnational organized crime and terrorism. A subsequent General Assembly resolution points out that organizations financing terrorists are usually also engaged in unlawful activities such as the ones described in the resolution. For the purpose of funding terrorist activities, these criteria are relevant. However, these observations are not necessarily useful for determining the legal principles that define terrorism per se, since the similarity in organization and violence observed between a terrorist organization and organized crime involves a political element which is absent from organized crime. Article 2A of the so-called CATOC is instructive in understanding exactly what organized criminal groups mean. This says that organized criminal groups shall mean a structured group of 3 or more persons existing for a short period of time and acting in concert with the aim of committing one or more serious crimes or offences established in accordance with the Convention in order to obtain directly or indirectly financial or other material benefit. Certain delegations participating in the preparatory committee of the Transnational Organized Crime Convention, including those of Algeria, Egypt and Turkey, were of the view that the scope of the definition under the convention should be specifically tailored to include crimes committed in order to obtain directly or indirectly a moral benefit. Other delegations were of the view that the idea of a moral benefit was rather ambiguous. During the 8th session, the delegation of Algeria proposed the addition of the words or any other purpose. This proposal was supported by Egypt, Morocco and Turkey. In the same session, the Turkish representative stated that their country could not accept the present formulation of the paragraph, which excluded not only crimes committed for purposes other than financial or material benefit, but also failed to mention any of the links between transnational organized crime and terrorist activities, as established in the 1994 Naples Political Declaration that was adopted by the previous General Assembly. Turkey strongly favored annexing this declaration to the draft convention. Now, this position was supported by some of the delegates at the 9th session of the ad hoc committee, including the allies of Turkey such as Algeria, Egypt and Morocco. Mexico also supported this on the eventual definition of organized crime. But the final definition contains neither an express nor a tacit reference to terrorism. Thank you.